the first one is for Peter Seaton. It's called Understanding Heraldry. Yes, they're alive and can have those colors. When you see a picture of Peter, you think about Peter, who's thinking he can talk to the dead. The idea wasn't original. From ancient times, warriors and rulers adopted tribal symbols that in time came to represent faces, which came to mean faces, by incorporating features of the faces of the vanquished dead. There are endpoints to any spectrum, leading questions, deixis. Does it seem dead? Are you quite dead? The set dictates you be very dead with me now, even if I cannot ever stop remembering you, even if you really are Peter, the ox, the owl, and the eagle are familiar to everyone. All of them turn on the same structural problem. The outside is bigger, but strangely no more visible than the inside. Our pictures, close as they may be to you, lack a certain feature, difficult to specify, whose absence gives symbolic status to the object. It was during endless winters that moments undoubtedly arose, and blazonry from an origin equally yet to come and already happened. We talk, but we cannot revive them, the mound of fading objects called environment. It is not an environment, it is a concept. But now you say we're coming to an end. The model has nothing to do with precision, everything a casual instance of wishing you were here, and you are, for you are pondering escape. The 6 lions rampant, or 3, then 2, then 1, passant, guardant, in order of descent, similar to types found in the vicinity of Nantes. Yes, they are alive and can have those colors by hereditary right, a meaningless stain when looked at straight on, only acquiring contours of a face in retrospect. In the whole wild life of comparing you to an alien species, they walk off, become themselves only in retrospect. A new image of the thinker. He carries the apple spray, the emblem of victory, a picture of Peter who isn't there, only the compassionate landscape itself. The jilted dead are a part of it. When I see a picture of Peter, I think of Peter thrown into ecstasy because he isn't there, a chevron between 3 swans argent, one whereof we still retain the crest. Having captured life like a fish on a hook, the reactive forces turn against themselves with the subtle coordination of actors with nothing to act. Here the words expire, become ours. In their protest against women, they walk off, become themselves as if to die with, to desire. And all that babble about the decline of paternal authority conceals how swell the ride was to hear, where by sight the nobles climbed in to fight against the absence of the vocabulary of the thing written. And coming and leaving, in short, the whole life of you preparing the ground for defense. Draw, they said, so we can make sure we're here. Through this room, they took me to my father. White hot those colors, where the border figured a second ago, a heavy-set heavenly radiance. White grows within a sun, within a treasure. 2 bodies conjoined to one head, an overall paralysis. We laugh about that tonight, and suddenly, forever after. What we're saying is we don't have to worry about there not being there. Mind, where the picture appears heading up to a lack, is local, the enclosure itself. Or rather, the feeling of loyalty to the group, the marks written in the community of them. We're somehow trained by smiles, the shape of a face, to assume this commitment to a secret we will never know, but cannot doubt any more than that blood is, in the mystical names of the rulers, another way of saying embodiment. I had a feeling, Peter said, seemed to be a continuation of my arms. that possibility being utterance, as either he or she or anyone once made a rose jewels cross the scallops of the third, the old surmise in both, you should have been with us. The lights off slowly surround you, and in time represent what you're asking. Is this something internal to Peter, or to the concept of Peter? In the purest sense, this is not a question, but the kind of forgetting we hear has been around forever, in fact, written into the blackness as the second death we use to make the first one appear right. Yes, they're alive and can have those colors, but what we're really aiming at is something else. Something you really have to keep your eyes open for. I mean, the refusal of those colors that spread from one melody to every canvas, inexorably leaving you in the sand, breathing air, regarding the primitive foundation of a planet in terms of what you mean to me. It is no longer twilight, but it's so dark in here. Not swinging freely, not dead, but dying. To be touched, in a way. It's the point from which the picture looks back at us. Card for Healing, to Michael Ives and Mary Caponegro. Michael and Mary love you and wish all culture represented by grief will over time be more viable on the page and on the front of words thinking. Death understands the rhyme scheme and underscores this pathetic image. But hear, cold dear, how inadequately your words are facing the you and the we of our own far peace. The open. Technology, said Dorm, is the progress toward abstraction, the mouth of hell poets have warned of since tillage, money, property began, since syntax and the word. But underneath is still the music, breath, blood, my frozen fingers warmed inside your hand that only loosens its grasp to slap me out of discourse and into the open moan. Inspired speech for Carla Harriman. Want to help me try to put this in? The cordon flowed loose in my fingers, and the grackles on the lawn set forth toward the house. I know I can't simply sit down and confront the alternating current of domestic's aisle and forced intellection, but still the morning rises in appliqued languor, ready to be traded at the nearest toll, you know, flying about, yet holding the space to receive diligence of concentration. If I generally believed these birds would be still, I'd have stopped waiting for the quiet years, though turning over the image of sitting at a desk now serves a certain adhesive function in the air around the sofa. What has been framed as a battering ram of creative pursuits, D2 messes, nibbling carrots, and waiting for the egg to boil. All that I know of inspired speech is simply this. Letter to Charles Olson, May 1st, 2015. A poem. You cut into story the primary equal of its parts, of what has been converted from legend and myth into something called history, where people, having lived here for millennia, unrelieved, more or less escapes the conversation. You know the diminishment I mean, the present loss of context and the misery of expenditure and gain, for which read urgency. What is it with this country that will not wait a minute before it strikes, but is always looking for its history as a transcript of experience which doesn't have what this or that girl said or did, and this is loss. Anyone who would try to make this reappear as art has to damn well respect the consequences, to make them clear, to compose his refusal of the misery in abundance, to walk in that world where you find the real in any direction, not the spent presentation of some American event, lifting up meaning only to break it on the floor, asserting it should have been realism. Dear Charles, I'm not going to write to you from my usual position of giving reasons for not writing to assure you I'm alive. Because today is good. The old voices I've neglected have come back and are demanding an outlet with surprising kindness given the criminals they've had to live with. Anyway, I dreamt last night about your vision of the beautiful boat, but either my memory failed or my eyesight did, and I realized I'd have to build the thing entirely from scratch. At first I froze, then suddenly the boat tacked and I was jumping sideways to avoid being hit by the boom. I was reading this in a book I could see but couldn't feel. When I went to turn the page, my fingers didn't touch anything. It was the sacred book of language. It was open to a page that read, "Work dexterously with delight. Draw everything out from your heart. Meet it with your mind. Compose the pieces. Make them adjust." There was something throbbing in my heart, dark with a red glow, spreading into my guts and throat. I wanted it to spread through my limbs and radiate out of my body, but I only knew how to draw the forces in. So I gathered it back to my heart and rocked it like a baby. Someone on my left was beating the air away from my head with a feather. The shapes of an eagle and then a butterfly appeared in a fierce red glow. They drew closer and closer until all I could see was the color. Steora, star from a bird's wing. A myth. Back when human language was an animal, it carried the earth and the sky in its mouth, and everything spoke. That was when the sun fell in love with the moon. Sun had heard that moon was contained in an old hollow log, so he scooped out the log to build a boat that would carry them away. Foolish sun, swelling sun, lie quiet. Moon is missing, and only deer can bring her back. Lie quiet, sun, and wait for deer to pass, for nothing lasts. So sun waited the entire day, and when night finally came, moon appeared in the sky. Sun stole a deerskin to disguise himself and flew to her, and they were joined. Moon shone brightly then, but soon she went in search of other lovers, and the more she loved, the more brightly she shone. She grew so bright that no living thing on earth could sleep, and everyone went mad. They begged Sun to put out one of her eyes, and because Sun was jealous of Moon's lovers, he did. Dear Charles, this morning, someone told me that the weathermen split from SDS and became terrorists because they were brainwashed by a cult. He remembered being at what he thought was a party when he realized that everyone was performing a ritual and that they wanted him to join. For several minutes, he felt the blackest guilt for all the beings he had harmed, willingly or not. Then, all of a sudden, the guilt disappeared, and in every cell, he felt his oneness with the universe. Since I knew you studied Crowley, I thought, now's the time to write to Olson and tell him why I've been silent so long. He will understand. This is a ritual to banish silences. Love, Cole. They were going to start the world all over again in Africa, but they needed to have industry. The biggest above-board industries of the old world were sausage production and shellfish processing. Huge cement flats everywhere were filled with one food product or the other, and the sun had filled the sausage flats with enormous yellowed swarming maggots, and the crustacean flats were alive with spiders and the non-aquatic brethren of crabs, which were interbred with or devoured by one another. It was a rancid job, and the workmen used massive trowels, and all of them were sick with skin rot, and sometimes they just had to hose the beasts down to prevent them from lunging. In the New World, they're going to economize. Only the seaside hotel industry, now a minor breadwinner, will survive, but the guests will be crossbred with prawns and grubs, among other things, the lower manifestations of these operations pouring in through their windows every time the tide rises. One day, we found a rotting grapefruit on the inside of the sliding glass patio door, kelp and mites stuck to it. The next day, the delicate balance of mutation had shifted, and we were fish with the noses of dolphins. We were sequestered in the basement in buckets and dumped from the exposed and rusty rebar into trawling pools to serve as bait for the once lowly crustaceans, our ancestors. We were not so easily subdued, however, and began eating the crustaceans intended to eat us. This was part of a cruelly engineered program. As soon as they were inside us, the crustaceans began to breed in our organs, making rotten foam rubber pills of our intestines, breeding and rotting until our skin was too tight and came off as if flayed when we flexed, our flanks writhing with worms and bits of unidentifiable machinery. In this form, we were cast back up onto the cement floor to be harvested. Even the hardiest workmen, much improved versions of the old world seamen, felt their stomachs revolt against the work. We were dipped in lye solution and our snouts broke off, so we couldn't talk. Then we knew there was no chance of our ever ruling the earth again, as humans once had. We ran pointlessly for our lives through the mammoth hotel basement, up into the lobby, and out onto the forbiddingly chaotic African motorway. Art Cave. It started in the theater. I began as an audience member, worked briefly as an usher, then ended up on the stage. A terrifying Bible salesman would preach Armageddon in front of the fire exit during all our performances, but there were ancient Croatian witches in the audience who knew how to read such intimidation tactics as drama. The witches knew that the prancing manipulator by the exit and the girl volunteer running grips from the wings were, in fact, the protagonists. The actors ran through the aisles disrupting the action, and only those who knew our secret saw us. We were sharks, tapered and glistening. The male shark lunged, and I gave birth from the wound he made above my right hip bone. The baby shark was gorgeous, all slathered in tiny diamonds. One day, the witches disappeared. I was a person again, and my beautiful baby shark was invisible and could frolic in the air. I left the theater and went to the art cave, hidden under the flower display in the park, behind the military records office, just past the fish pond at the entrance to the highway. For centuries, musicians and lunatics have snuck through a perilous gap in the window of the military archive. There's easier access by hopping the fence along Main Street, but no one seems to remember this. What's stranger, the art cave isn't even hidden. From the bustling street, a passerby could look directly inside and decry its mysteries, but in 400 years, this has never happened. This total exposure, combined with the inviolate sanctity of the cave, is the first discomfort an initiate gets over. There's also the reek and the green scum, along with a smashed German biplane that confuses the poets that come to pay homage. In the cave, 8 of us enter into trances looking for the right album. There's a collection of rare 78s, and trying to organize bodies according to the pattern that ends human suffering. But the trances themselves are painful. We rend our clothes to find the answer on the paisley lining of a sports coat and deface works of art, scratching out features to approximate the planar face of peace. In the end, we're splayed on the ground in a hexagon, while one person beats like a heart in the middle. The evil mongers bound in the rock wall and barred by a stove cry out, and whoever we are, we open our eyes to a moment without war. Red state. In the basement of my parents' house, there are sharp carpeted inclined planes from ceiling to floor. I'm down there with my stepfather and another young man. We've gone down to see if the disturbance heard from upstairs might be attributed to an animal or would-be burglar in the backyard. The light switch panel to the left of the basement's back door has 3 levers which activate bulbs over different sections of the lawn and flower beds. My stepfather has tried the 2 switches closer to the door, both in sequence and in concert, but has discovered nothing. By deduction, the intruder, assuming it was something visible, could neither be on the lawn in front of the balcony nor under the awning to the left in the shady herb patch which winds round to the side gate. Discouraged, despite the fact that his investigations haven't been exhaustive yet, my stepfather retires to rest along the inclined claret-colored wall, lost in darkness, and I rise to run the remaining trial of lights. It doesn't seem curious to me that such a meticulous man should have given up before the completion of his tests. As I near the panel with the switches, both my stepfather and the male guest draw in like frightened children, my stepfather just behind my left shoulder, the other man fixed against the doorway that leads to the bathroom at my right. I flip on the switch. Light floods the fern grove and brick stairway beneath the far right balcony of the house. There, crouched in the dirt, against the tiny door to the crawl space, a man, furtively hugging his knees, was seen bolting to an upright position and darting toward the door behind whose windows our 3 faces hovered. There wasn't an instant to consider why this man seemed so familiar or why his name, John Boones, sprang to my mind in bold black characters. In fact, a recent clipping from the front page of the newspaper pinned to the basement wall beside the meat refrigerator bore his name, the reward for his detention, and the following terse description. Fastest murderer ever plagued America. No one has ever seen his face in action. Not even his victims see it coming. Springs, shoots dead, and disappears in less than a second. The back door screamed open, my stepfather and the male guest dead on the floor, dark blood already clotting around the punctures. The infamous killer had shot like the tongue of a snake in a deadly flicker and recoiled, more a streak of motion than a progress of static moments. I stood near the Vietnamese coast. Rust-colored milk mixed with hornet swarms of shrapnel broke all across the land in a blunt metallic rain. Muscular waves swelled from the gauze ocean like pus. The waves loomed over the people. Everything was dark except where the poison rain glowed. The people were partly naked, partly sheltered under fragments of their leveled homes, clutching children and each other, heads craned backward, mouths stretched open as if parched and straining to catch the electric sky in their throats. Scalps were rinsed off by the rain, flesh melted in slow gelatinous combustion. I set out by car to Indiana, a red state on the map. I left the car and all of my possessions. I was on the street that bore the small single-story home of John Boones. The awning was stretched on mottled chrome spears with an oily patina of black and white mildew. The front door had the same tinny finish as the spears. The loose-hanging door was coppery and chipping. I only touched the door when I was already inside and, by some equation of mourning or injustice, became the civil wife and cohort of John Boones. It was a cozy, simple home to tend, with a spacious backyard and sufficient, if outdated, kitchen amenities and recliner chairs. There was a thin beige carpet, a television, and an extra bedroom where John's dying mother spent her last days in solemn health consciousness. John and I enjoyed sitting at twilight in the low beach chairs with plastic straps on the back patio, looking at the citrus tree, the barbecue, the bare wood fence that stood the lines of the property, and listening to the cicadas. One day, John and I entered a chapel. There was a domed black vinyl awning over the threshold and stone steps. In the front hall was an 18th century writing desk. In a barren room just beyond were a bird-headed archivist in a raincoat and his assistant. John shot them dead in a streak of his brown overcoat, emptied their pockets, and fled the building with casual farewells to the groundskeeper. All this took less than a second, and we disappeared. John had gone out with his friends, leaving me at home to complete a kitchen inventory and prepare his dead mother's body for burial. He had gone by foot to the crest of a tall heathered peak and gazed over onto the sprawling city of Gary to the east. There was a clean, hot nap to the air, and he was in his shirt sleeves. This was the day of John's death. No one had wanted him gone. We were neither hunted nor feared in our community. If anything, perhaps, John was respected above ordinary citizens, and myself deferentially treated like an old-fashioned belle dame because I darned his socks. None of the victims' families had prosecuted, let alone even suspected John. We lived in safety and razor-simple killing, yet now John was dead and gone. I live in his house alone, visited periodically by my sisters, who entreat me to come home. Their monotone concern for my safety makes them ugly and pimpled. Brown dog eyes glisten from their raw cheeks. John's disappearance remains unknown to his local admirers, but has stirred up a violent controversy among federal police officials. I wait for barking dogs or siren bleats to wheel into my home. Instead, only the usual worshiping slatterns come by day, as always, to the bedroom window which overhangs the alley. They strip methodically for the murderer, calling for him to just appear at the window, or even to scold or graze them with an admonishing bullet. I sit on the back patio alone by night on the low beach chair, whose plastic straps wear runnels in my thighs. The island. A man, believed to be in poor health, is fated to have an attack of some sort which will cause the entire world to derail. Sheba and I are standing in the downstairs lobby of the literature building at the university. She is showing me the book she's currently reading. Sheets of paper, 11 by 14 inches, spiral bound at the narrow end like a musical score. The book doesn't open like a score though, but vertically like a huge notepad. It is some relatively trashy story about a man being kept in a sanitarium believed to be insane. His nurse is a caring, fragile woman, silently in love with him, who realizes that he is not deranged, but a genius or something to that effect. Sheba tells me she's afraid to proceed, that she's come to a block in her reading because she anticipates that the man will have an attack, which will destroy both him and the world of the story as she knows it. I offer to skim ahead for her so she won't be afraid. I take the book from her hands and begin leafing through the pages, but notice that after the point where she stopped, none of the pages have any words, only dark black horizontal lines. I flip further ahead, reading the absence of words on each line. Then I too come to a block in my reading and am petrified, certain that a colossal transformation will occur if I turn the next page, certain that the word of God will be revealed on that page. Summoning all my courage, I turn the page and find another one with nothing but black lines. The only difference is that the lines run vertically so that when the book is turned on its side, it reads like music. Perhaps this is the story in those pages. Perhaps it's another story. I am a nursemaid in the home of an aging, infirm white man and his younger, subjugated black wife. I work with an assistant, a boy slightly younger than myself. Due to the man's failing liver, we live beneath a large dome, its surface made of triangulated fiberglass panels like the Tijuana Cultural Center. Within this sanctuary, large enough to encompass a modest sea or continent, a flapper's fringe of coastal promontories, the man has created an island run by a small nuclear generator located at its core. The man and his brother row or are beamed out to the island each day at dawn. Through a video porthole, we are able to track his motions in infrared, survey his location, and communicate with him in rudimentary sentences when absolutely necessary. The boy and I are in the large dining hall, which houses the concealed porthole and an elegant cherry attaché case in which piles of silver rest on monogrammed napkins arranged by type, waiting to be laid in the proper position at each place on the table. Large dinner events where inheritance hopefuls bid for floor space with light-speed walkie-talkies are held almost every night. When the cook informs us that dinner is ready, I send word to the man on the island and summon him home. Later that evening, or a few days later, the man is seized by an attack. As if they were the same organism, the island begins to writhe and break apart, starting with the nuclear plant. Fissures appear in the twin white cylinders with radar red tips, the radio towers protruding from the roof of the plant, and dark gray smoke seeps from them in billows, forced by the pressure mounting inside. The concave cement floor of the plant cracks wretchedly as though tectonic plates were colliding just beneath its surface, breaking into crags that seethe and grumble as they splinter apart. The man and his brother are on the island as this happens, unable to escape, held to the soil by the vacuum pull of its life, drawing everything close in a fierce contraction of survival, a gasp that conducts all atmosphere to its ailing core. The man calls to me over the exploding monitor. I can barely make out his words, his image, the image of the island, the monitor itself. He's never called out before, has always held his gestural ground against the dinner bell like an intransigent child. Everything is flanked by erratic chasms of static and broken blurbs of information. Then reception dies. Someone must be sent out to survey the ruins, to recover the old man if he still lives. Partly because I am expendable, and partly because the man considers me intelligent, I am chosen to perform the task. His wife is forbidden to go to the island, as the man believes she will corrupt it with her Amazonian nature, and that it will ruin her hardy spine with its transcendental pangs. Heedless, I bring her with me. Sensing her presence, the island slowly, almost impeccably, sensing her presence, the island slowly, almost imperceptibly, ceases to quake. With the slowest possible movements, the terrain she passes over calms and begins to mend itself. Blonde, milky cicatrices span like baobab roots from her progressing heels. I remember nothing after this point. So I think I'll end it there.